Welcome to Forward Obsessed, where we talk to breakthrough business leaders and rising entrepreneurs about their journeys, origin stories, and aha moments.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning into Forward Obsessed. Please remember to like and subscribe on your favorite platforms, and we would greatly appreciate a review. It helps us keep this going. It helps other people discover the show. On today's episode, we talked to Michael Kalman, really brilliant investor, advisor, consultant, and entrepreneur, most importantly. Started out in the advertising industry. We're going to talk about the old way of advertising, the new way of advertising, and the future of work. We're going to go in so many different directions. If you're building a business, have built businesses, or are thinking about building businesses, you don't want to miss this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Hello and welcome to Forward Obsessed. I am your co-host, David Salinas, met here with
Pete Senna.
And today we have Michael Kalman. Michael, it's a pleasure to have you today.
It's great to be here.
So Michael, we always like to kick things off by telling people a little bit about you, and then we like to dive into your early years. So in 30 seconds, tell us who you are.
My overall objective is to help companies figure out how to become successful, how to go to market, how to build products that the marketplace wants. And I get satisfaction from doing that. So every company or everything I've ever started, it's really about achieving something that makes a difference in somebody's lives. And in some cases, that's a commercial enterprise. And in some cases, it's a nonprofit. But the common thread with everything I'm now doing is I'm trying to find a way to grab satisfaction. I'm trying to figure out a way to make a difference. I'm trying to figure out a way to help others. I've had a very fortunate career in the media space. And most of it was a grind. Most of it was figuring out a way to take something from zero and make it something far greater than that. And you get to a point in your life where it's really about figuring out a way to help others achieve the same thing. So my background is media. I've been in the media business since 1990. I've been in the agency business. My first job out of college was at a small agency in Manhattan, where I wasn't making a whole lot of money and I was working 100 hours a week. And I thought that was the greatest thing ever. There was no stress. I wasn't married yet. I didn't have children yet. I didn't have a mortgage. And, getting to work at 7 o'clock in the morning and leaving at 7 or 8 o'clock at night was pretty cool. My first boss in advertising worked for David Ogilvy. And so you see the American Express ads, it says C.F. Frost. My first boss in advertising was Charlie Frost. And Charlie said to me, my first week I said to him, so explain to me what your expectations are. When do you want me to come in? When do you want me to leave? I'm assuming this isn't a 9-to-5 job. He's like, I get in at 7:30. So if you can get here before me, that would be great. And I leave at 7. So if you can stay after me, I'll know you've put a full day in. And I didn't think anything about a 12-hour day. I never thought that would be a problem. It's a half day, right? It was a half day. I went, years later, I went to another agency, and during orientation, kid raises his hand and he says to Jim Jordan, who founded Jordan, McGrath, Case and Taylor, he says, how come we don't have half-day Fridays, Mr. Jordan? And Mr. Jordan gets up and he goes, because we have half-day Saturdays. And so what I learned very early on, especially given the role my father played in my life in terms of being self-made and being the first generation, was that no one was going to hand you anything. You had to really grind. You had to have your chin up the whole time. You had to be in a position where you knew for the next 20, 30 years you were going to work. You were going to deliver value for somebody. You were going to create something where there was nothing. And this wasn't a world where there were victims and excuses.
So we like to dive in right there. That you brought us to a very good point. Early years for Michael Kalman. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the mean streets of Westport, Connecticut.
Okay.
My wife and I met in college in Maine. We lived in Greenwich. We moved back to Westport. Parents still live there.
What'd your father do? Because I know your father, reading up on you, your father had a big impact on you because he was the first to go to college. And so what did he do?
So my father was in the food business. I'll start a little further back. My grandfather owned a luncheonette.
Okay.
And my father worked there, and he had to work Saturdays and Sundays.
Westport?
In Westport and New Haven.
Okay.
And my father hated the idea of working Saturdays and Sundays.
Okay.
And so when he was really young, someone approached him and said, you know what you should consider? You should consider being a food broker. So my father was a food broker for most of his career. The most notable thing that my dad did was he helped Paul Newman start Newman's Own.
Oh, wow.
So Newman's a Westport guy. Newman used to bottle the salad dressing around Christmas in old wine bottles. He used to give it to neighbors and friends. And my father met him, and Newman's like, I want to just sell this to health retailers and little food stores. And my father's like, well, it's gonna be really hard to do that. We should probably consider a strategy where we sell it to every supermarket in the country. And they launched the salad dressing, they launched the spaghetti sauce, they launched the popcorn. And in the 90s, when I got out of college and I had started in advertising for a brief stint, I worked for my dad's business.
Okay.
Much of my time was making sales calls to retailers to sell Newman's Own product. So, waiting in the lobby for open to buy day at BJ's Wholesale in Natick for them to see you so you could show them spaghetti sauce and salad dressing was like, those are the things I remember doing. But it was, there were no promises of early success. There was no golden ticket. Even with my dad, it was a combination of you're going to work hard, you're going to kind of eat what you kill. There's no gimmies. And I think, both my brother and I have a very strong work ethic, and I'm seeing that same type of work ethic translate into my children, right? So my kids are 4.0 students in college. They're probably just a whole lot smarter than me to begin with, but I'm super proud of the fact that they can not only go to school, get A's, but also take on jobs and do really well in the careers and the jobs that they're taking on. So early on, it was sort of like I always had a job. It was everything from putting together the Sunday New York Times to cleaning the counters at jewelry stores to vacuuming at the local pharmacy when I was under 16 to being really interested in cars and trying to work in car dealerships when I was 16 or, working for guys that had an idea and they wanted me to help them with, sell it. I mean, my early stage career was really about sales. It was really about we call it, was trying to figure out a way to separate others from their money, right? It was like, we got something, hopefully we can figure out a way to get somebody to buy it from us. The advertising business is the business of selling ideas. It's the business of presenting a lot of different work and getting something to stick and then executing it and doing it flawlessly. So you delight your clients and they come back and they do it again the next season.
I'm going to take that and I'm going to run that on repeat for anybody that I know that's trying to learn this game because you just summed it up in the best. That was awesome.
It's nice of you to say. I remember as a very young advertising executive going to meet a client my first week and getting my teeth kicked in with a creative director and a copywriter.
Tell us about that. So you did what, and then what did it look like to get your teeth kicked in? Take us into that story. Take us into that room because we all know what it feels like to get our teeth kicked in. I want the audience to feel that.
I remember it like it was yesterday.
Take us through the
Filene's Basement is one of my earliest accounts.
Filene's
Basement, right? The discount guys. And I'm probably all of 25. And my job is to fly every week from New York to Boston to present to Mr. Gerson, who, along with venture capital, bought the Filene's business from Filene's. If you remember, Filene's was in the basement. Filene's Basement was in the basement of Filene's. They had this wacky idea that they were going to be in the closeout business and they were going to syndicate that model and put Filene's Basement stores, much like TJ Maxx and Marshall's, across the country. And so he raised money and he was an investor and he was an imposing guy who knew the clothing, the rag business really well. And I remember it was hit or miss because he didn't have a lot of time for you. And it kind of reminded me of every boss I ever had or my dad where he just wanted to see what we were going to present him. He didn't really want to have some pleasantries. We sat in this dark conference room. We looked at animatics on a fairly regular basis and storyboards. And I remember him looking at us and he said, do you guys actually believe in the work you're presenting today? I'm 25. I mean, I'm managing this account and the creative people are defending their work. And I remember them defending to the point where I'm now I'm way younger than them. I'm like, you guys got to stop. You guys got to listen to him because he's going to tell you what he wants. And he looked at us and he said, your work sucks and your work's not going to drive traffic to my businesses. And if you guys can't drive traffic, I don't need you. And I was a kid. Like, he wasted no time and I just remember whenever I had like that moment with a client where they were unhappy, I got a flashback to Mr. Gerson. And it was one of those things where I was like, if they're unhappy, not only are they going to be unhappy, they're going to tell everyone in their organization that you can't deliver. And not only that, they're going to tell their friends who also have like the need for marketing services. And it's going to be a cancer. And so this idea where you can phone it in on one client is a pipe dream. Because if you take a client, you have to deliver for them, because churning clients is really tough. Churning clients in every business is really tough. And one of the things we got good at MediaCrossing, and one of the things I got good at, I think, in my early career was sales and customer acquisition. If I could explain to a client how they could acquire customers using the tools we have, whether it's creative or, marketing technology or a really good media mix strategy, they weren't going anywhere. They liked that. They weren't going to get that from somebody else. So I go back to like my early days in advertising, which was a way to kind of formulate my mindset into how we had to service clients much, much later in life.
I love that, but I want to get back to that room where you got your teeth kicked in.
It was terrible.
Okay. So now you're in this room.
Yeah.
You're about 25, like you said.
Yep.
The senior creative folks are in the room presenting their work. Mr. Gerson takes a big giant, on the thing.
He took a big dumper on it. It was
Big
terrible.
dumper. So, and if you could talk to your 25-year-old self before you walked into Mr. Gerson's dark conference room, what would you say to that 25-year-old today with the knowledge you have, so that you walked into that meeting and you didn't get your teeth kicked in, right? Because in your shoes, you couldn't at that point change the creative. The creative was the creative, right? So you sit there, the work's being presented. What would you have done differently to change the teeth kicking in moment?
Look, I think part of our jobs with clients is being diplomatic and being statesmanlike.
What does that mean?
Meaning that you literally have to, a client is rooting for you. They really just want you to meet their expectations, and they don't want to go through the trouble of making it change, because onboarding a new agency is really tough. They're rooting for you. They want you to hear them. And I think what I probably would have done is, in my own way, look for an opportunity to ask for another chance, because we had gone up there 2 or 3 times presenting creative that was unacceptable, but we didn't spend enough time listening. So the older Michael would have told the younger Michael, let's really map out what he's looking for, because so far everything we have delivered to him has been unacceptable. Because the third time when he told us that he blew up and he kicked our teeth in, by the time I landed back at LaGuardia, he had called my boss and fired us. And we were terminated. And now what's interesting about the advertising business, especially in the 90s, was if you didn't have an account to work on, you didn't have a job. They didn't like just automatically rotate you on something else. Most likely you were on that 1 or 2 pieces of business. You were a subject matter expert related to that client's marketplace, how they go to market and what they do. You kind of got pigeonholed. If you were working on Filing's Basement, you were working on maybe other retail accounts.
You were switching to pharmaceutical.
Correct. They weren't put you on packaged goods, right? They weren't. So you had to be in a position where
you were the domain expert in that area.
I was like, yes, I had to do the research, and there wasn't Google back then. So you were calling clipping services. You were going to the library. You were talking about all these different retail things. You were doing a lot of reading about. There was an expectation that every quarter you were providing a client with a white paper, a point of view on how they should evolve their marketing spend, what they should do in terms of new tactics. I mean, it wasn't as difficult as it is now from one standpoint. I mean, you had 4 media tactics: TV, radio, print, and out of home. Like, you could exploit the hell out of those. It was how you wanted. Now there's like 27. There's TV, radio, print, out of home, display, video, mobile, social, streaming audio, connected TV, native, and search. Oh, and by the way, like marketing automation like HubSpot or Marketo or Eloquai, like all these other things that you can like plug your brand in to build a one-to-one relationship with customers. But the older Michael would have told the younger Michael that we got to pull the nose up on this one. We're not going to have a lot of chances on this. And not only will this guy remember how sucky we did, he will tell everyone in his social circle, and we will literally, it will be like an atomic bomb went off in New England when it comes to us. We won't find a way to recover. We got to make this work. And so I see too many agencies that like win a piece of business, they service the hell out of it, they win something bigger, and then they kind of neglect the people that help them get to where they've gotten, and they get fired. And I'm like, somewhere after you guys did an S-curve and you scaled, you forgot what the customer wanted, or you forgot how to service them the way they felt comfortable being serviced. Frankly, I think there's two reasons these professional relationships don't work. There's just two: communications and expectation. I think that's the root of every single personal and professional problem. I know my wife will argue with me in a very polite way that there's more variables to a relationship than those two. But I think if you boil it down, if I told you I was going to be here at 11 and I don't show up, you had an expectation that I was going to show up, and I blew you off. If I called you at 11:15 and told you that, God forbid, someone's in the hospital, I communicated. So I didn't meet your expectations, but I communicated. And so everything we have to do is we have to say to ourselves, did we communicate clearly and effectively? Did we give somebody like the roadmap? Did we meet their expectations? And by the way, the third alpha is like, did we satisfy their needs on both those levels?
There's a little bit of Pareto principle in there too, though, like the 80-20, whereas like I know a lot of agency owners, right? Like we've owned an agency, we know a lot of agency owners that have been in, been out, like yourself. And the agency game, and there's a lot that's broken about the agency game. We could have a whole other episode on that, right?
Oh God.
Well, but I think just to one point, and then I want to pass it back to David, is the agencies, the margins is a little bit of a race to the bottom, and
100%.
So as a result of it, I think what ends up happening is you spend 80% of your time, most agencies spend 80% of their time on business development, trying to win clients and upsell, cross-sell, and then 20% of their energy on actually doing the work.
The execution piece.
The execution piece. And in my experiences, it's the small boutique agencies that try harder, right, in a lot of cases. And then because they're putting their energy into making great work and making that great work work. But as the agency scales 50, 60, 100 people,
Right.
then it comes down to the next big thing. So what I've heard a lot from folks is that the way the business model is set up, the way the compensation models are set up, there's not enough energy to be able to double down on that work. So we're going to come back to that later on today, because I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how do you answer the bell when it comes to what you said about expectations and communications, when it really comes down to how do you make the damn work better when too much distraction is happening to the next shiny object?
It's the hardest thing for all agencies. There's a genuine balancing act between, I call it sales and service. Selling and then servicing that client. And they're remarkably different skill sets, and they take remarkably different talent sets within your organization to scale both sides effectively. And they're both symbiotic. Like if you don't have sales, you don't have the people working, and if the people working aren't really good at delivering the creative, like years ago in that situation I mentioned, you can't sell yourself out of that much client churn. So they have to be aligned. And so I know you want to cover it later, but what I would say is you've got to figure out your lane. You've got to figure out the area in which you play. So, when I sold MediaCrossing to a public company, and then, after we transitioned the business, I moved on to kind of a consulting role. I know the types of clients that I'm going to be really good at helping them achieve their objectives. I know the ones specifically in the categories where I can help them figure out a customer acquisition strategy. I can help them figure out some product marketing, some product testing. Oh, and advertising, because that's kind of been my background. Oh, and by the way, because I sold to a public company, I know the governance piece that's going to be required for them to have a notable exit someday. And then there's a list of companies where I don't know anything, where I look at somebody and go, hey, I think this is great. I don't know. What you're saying, it sounds like you're talking Ewok to me. I have no idea what you're trying to achieve. I'm the wrong guy.
Self-awareness.
I was offered a job very early on after I left, the company that purchased our MediaCrossing. And I said, I got to be honest, I don't really know how I would make an impact. There's probably 1,000 other guys that would be better suited to do this than me. And the guy was like, no, you're really good. And you took a company to you exit. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not good at what you do. Like, I don't think, and it was an environmental services company, trading, carbon credits. And no matter how much research I did about trading carbon credits, I realized that there were going to be guys way fucking smarter than me about trading carbon offsets. And I would be like, no matter what meeting I would go to, I'd be catching up. Yeah. I'd much rather go to.
It's also a hard business to understand. It's like insurance. How do you make money? They don't even know.
They don't even know. I'd much rather work with our friend Chris at iCleanse, because I understand the digital out-of-home market, and I understand personalization when it comes to building media that's one-to-one with a customer. And I love working with a guy like that who grinds, who like works 100 hours a week. So that's a whole separate conversation. But like there's certain companies that like fit this mold, or I can stay in my lane and I can figure out a way to make money doing that. Because and so what I would say to agencies, if you don't understand the category, or you don't understand the expectation, or you don't have the people that can like integrate with their people to see success, you got to walk away.
Yes, step the fuck out.
The hardest part I've had in the service industry is, I think you're 100% correct. I think communication expectations. I think the problem that I've seen in the industry, and the thing that frustrated me the most, is that I don't feel like the expectations are, with most people, are spoken or are realistic.
I think they're unrealistic, and I think there's an X factor. Sorry.
No.
There's an X factor, procurement.
Yeah.
Talk about like, you go to, you pitch a client, you make the finals. The marketing guy loves what you had to say. The boss, the CMO, thinks this is like the best partnership ever. And then for 90 days, you're dealing with a guy who's never been to a meeting, who doesn't understand, who basically looks and goes, I think your production costs are going to be out of whack.
Yeah.
Number two, I think your fees on social media. I'm like, my fees on social media represent the fact that we took a look at the last 2 years of campaigns, and you have like 80 assets that have to be like trafficked every other month. And like literally, I can't use somebody part-time to do this work. I've got to hire somebody just dedicated to your account. So maybe you guys ought to try to figure out a way to bring that in-house. Oh, no. That would create a new cost center. Right. So yes, I think the expectation piece, especially when you're drafting an SOW, has been made exponentially more difficult.
And then there's another piece, which is the communications. What I found is that people don't always tell the truth, right? So when you're you play the game at a very high level, where you're dealing with big corporations that have procurement departments. We've played the game at that level, but we've also played at that small to mid-sized market, and
a few $100 million companies. Yeah.
And I think that you have people that don't communicate their budgets correctly, that don't communicate their willingness to for or against risk. I think they don't communicate their skill sets, and what you're left with is
champagne taste and not even good beer budgets.
Yeah, or it's really hard to understand the expectations or understand what the success is when the person doesn't communicate well. It's like I say that. It's to your point, your relationships with your wife, with your family, it's all the same, right? If you communicate effectively with clarity,
100%,
it makes life really easy. And I think that it takes a lot to get to that place with people. And we're in such a fast-paced place where the phones usually ring when someone's like, okay, go. I got a lot of pressure right now from my investors, my angels, my parent company, etc., my boss. And it doesn't leave enough time for that sort of what used to be a dating process in advertising agencies and marketing agencies. And that leaves a lot of opportunity for disaster.
Yeah, look, I think I remember working on Quaker very early in my career, and a brief was like 12 pages. And it talked about exactly how the brand was going to be portrayed, the settings under which the brand was going to be portrayed, the tonality. Like it was like the most amazing. It was like a style guide supercharged. Like there were every variable they could think of.
You didn't say we want to drive awareness and engagement for selling our products. We want to increase revenue and customer retention. You mean all the generic stuff that every brief today says?
Right. So like if you think about what social media has done for everybody, done as a disservice, everybody's looking for snackable content. Mm-hmm. So now we have snackable briefs.
Or the microwave success.
Yeah. Click.
The 30-second button.
Like a marketing guy calls me. It's like, I don't understand why this would be like so difficult. We're going to put some money in. You're going to find us some customers. Why is this so difficult? And I'm like,
was he Italian from? Was he like Tony from?
It was like this is going to be easy. And I go,
Heard that.
So I said to him, well,
Everything's easy.
So I said to him, here's what was really funny. It was a guy in the beverage business. And I go, look, I worked for 10 years on PepsiCo. They spend about $1.4 billion. So essentially, you're not creating new users to drink your beverage. You're actually switching them from a beverage they like to try yours. And so they spend, I don't know, a couple $100 million, $100 million plus per month. And you want to spend $24,000 over the next 6 months on programmatic to see if you can, and first of all, you can't ship soda.
Oh my God. We just had a company that had 2 billion. No, they were at 2 billion in assets under management. They wanted to grow to 5, or they were at 1 and they wanted to grow to 5. That was the goal.
Huge leap, man.
Guess how much the budget was?
$10,000 a month.
Very close. 20,000 a month.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I would say to them, like, so let's figure out on a ROAS basis, right? A return on ad spend. What should you look like? So for every dollar you spend in a perfect world against a perfect customer, when the seasons align and there's harmony, you're going to get a 6x at the top end. And you won't get a 6x for a year because no one knows who the hell you are. Mm-hmm. And so in the beginning, you're going to get a 1-to-1 or a 2x. Mm-hmm. So you're going to put $1 in, you're going to get $2 back in revenue for the next 6 months. How could that be? I'm like, because I don't know, Coca-Cola is the largest advertiser for beverages, and they've been doing it for like 100 years. They invented like beverage advertising. You're fighting people that have already figured out, they've taken root. They're the redwoods of advertising. You're trying to take market share from guys that have like been doing this for 100 years, a century. And so everybody thinks it's because no one knows how to write a brief. Mm-hmm. And so right off the bat, like it's like
garbage in, garbage out.
Right. There's so much ambiguity as to what the client wants. It gets really weird. So the client has an expectation, but his boss may have a different expectation. And based on on the budget they've stated, what you guys can deliver. And usually, it's not always that they lie. It's that they don't want to hear the truth. Mm. And so when you tell them it's going to take more money to be able to achieve that objective, well, we'll go find someone who can do that then. Great. And there's always somebody in the advertising space because it's an unregulated business.
Yeah. Problem is, my nickname is, right?
No.
Sucker.
that
was my nickname for a few years until I met Dave. And he was like, hey, Pete, can you please stop doing $20,000 projects for $2,000? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds good, Dave.
Yeah, but for a handful of reasons. A, you can't make any money, but B, you won't achieve the objective. Those two things are like...
but I really loved ramen noodles back then.
I used to call them PD501c3.
I never made a profit.
That's very funny. But I mean, literally, that's very funny. There's so many projects we had to walk away from. So, might I digress? We start MediaCrossing, and we're now taking every IO you can get. Mm. Because I looked at like how much cash we had raised, and I'm thinking,
up and to the right.
We had to figure out a way to reduce burn as fast as we could. And so what you end up doing is you take an amalgam of different types of clients with different needs, different requirements, and certainly different expectations, and you try to push them through a service hole that's big. Like, it's not like you're Omnicom, where you have a group that does health, you have a group that does entertainment, you have a group that does all these different specialties. You've got to be like a specialist in a world where like one person's working on beverage and they're also working on live events. Mm-hmm. And you got to be really good. And what you realize is until you start reducing your cash burn, you are saying yes to everything. Mm. And by the way, I do believe that's in VC world, venture capital world, family office funding world, the future in a high interest rate environment is that the startups that we advise have to stay and be very focused on what they do best. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, if they're building a SaaS platform and they want to take on like service related clients and have to do headcount that expands exponentially, they should be stopped. And so what that gets down to is like you figure out your lane and you push other vehicles out of the way. Like you figure out a way to own that lane. And if it lane for us at MediaCrossing was live events, mm-hmm. until COVID hit, where live events stopped. We were running live events 365 days a year, 7 days a week, and we had ops people working on Saturdays and Sundays because we were running live events, advertising to sell tickets to across the country on touring shows, and that was a business where like if somebody wanted to be selling live events tickets, we knew how to do that. Like that was our lane after a few years of being really smart about like not taking every piece of business, but taking the ones that we knew we could make a difference on.
So let's get into that. I think that's a good place. You came up through the advertising world, worked at small advertising agencies. Eventually you went to Icon, which was an Omnicom company, which is the first sort of big shop, right?
Yeah.
You cut your teeth there. You start to get some entrepreneurial experience, and then you decide in 2012-ish, because of technology, that you're going to start an agency, a digital agency,
right,
or a media agency that's focused on personalized media and all the tools and stuff that can happen. You decide that you're going to do this by raising capital.
Right.
Pete and I tried to do that when we started Digital Surgeons as well. We tried to raise capital, and it was at perfect timing. It was 2006.
Yeah.
So sort of, and I say that jokingly because I think that the people that are watching this today need to understand that it's never the right time. It's never the right time, right?
There's no way to time a startup.
There's no way to time the startup. There's no way to time the exit, as you've learned.
Right.
For us, we started raising capital. We had these guys that love the idea of investing in a hot technology, digital focused advertising agency, and then within 60 days, we showed back up, and these guys wouldn't even look us in the eye. They were so scared of the market. They were real estate investors that they realized that we were in what was going to become the housing bubble blow up, which was starting to happen. And they all pulled away from us except for one guy who said he was going to give us some capital. And he passed away in the middle of the negotiations. So we wind up with nothing, no rafts, no boats, no nothing. I think, he had a log and I had a log and it still floated. So we just said, hey, why don't we tie these two logs together and we'll see if we can get on the water and make a boat while we sail. So you decide that you're going to start MediaCrossing,
right?
And you decide to do that with venture capital and family office money.
We do.
So how long was that process? How much money did you raise, if you could say, and how long was that process to raise that capital?
So I can give you a little background. So I was at Icon from 2000 to the end of 2012. It was a great company, and it was a place where if you came up with an idea and leadership would support you, like you could model this out and you could be really smart about the economics of an idea, and you could trade problematic assets located around the globe for media time. And I frankly got particularly good at doing that. And so
Icon was a bartering company.
Still is.
Still is a bartering
So they're
company,
taking non-performing assets, they're trading them for media, they're going after the largest advertisers that are trying to rationalize assets of all types. So it could be distressed inventories, it could be non-performing debt, it could be real estate. And I did a fair amount of real estate deals over a period of a decade plus. And those were really very profitable, very fun. There were a lot of fun deals to work on. They weren't, you didn't close one a week. I mean, these had a long sales cycle. But fast forward, in 2012, the notion of audience buying had become like white hot. The notion of being able to connect advertisers to customers based on audience definition and certain characteristics and variables had become so elusive, right? So the smartphone really screwed it up for TV, radio, print, and out of home, because now there were new media types being created to reach customers on an individual basis based on habits and all these, and likes and dislikes and all that stuff, right? And so a group of us got together and we're like, we're going to build a trading desk. And the goal for the trading desk was that we wanted to focus on underserved customers. So if you were at PepsiCo, and that was my client for like 12 years at Icon, it was a great piece of business, Omnicom was going to invest in a trading desk for you. They were going to build, you had $100 million to peel off on media. They were going to figure out a way to deliver that for you, and God bless. But in 2012, which is like, just 13 years ago, right? 10 years ago, there was a slew of underserved clients. These were middle market clients that didn't have access to running, audience buying. And our hypothesis was that we could do the following. We could go to them and be their trading desk, or we could go to the agencies that middle market agencies that they worked with and bolt our technology on, and now we could be a digital arm. So very, very early on, most of our business at MediaCrossing was providing programmatic digital media to agencies that were servicing middle market clients. We had very few direct clients. In fact, we would say to the agencies we're working with, you probably want to put us on the phone with these clients. We'll sign a non-circumvent because you're going to get questions you can't answer. Like, you're never going to get in front of our client.
So basically what I'm hearing is the provider of your prospect is your partner.
Correct.
And then going that way creates ultimate scale.
Correct. So in the beginning, 80% of our business was going to agencies that didn't have a programmatic, platform. We weren't running programmatic. And we bolted on and helped them, do those buys. But over the last 4 or 5 years of our life cycle, it was the opposite. 80% of our business was advertisers that were looking for a digital tactic set of campaigns. 15 or 20% was agency related. But getting back to it, we did something that was really unusual. We started approaching the marketplace with our idea that we could provide middle market advertisers and agencies with programmatic resources and deliver buys. And we didn't go to strategic investors in the advertising space, which could have been our saving grace. We didn't go to anybody that knew a damn thing about funding ad agencies. We went to investors that had made a boatload of dough in the capital markets by creating trading systems.
Arbitrage.
Right. And so the guys that were investors through the entire lifespan of MediaCrossing. Right. So here's what they looked at. Digital media was an uncorrelated, unregulated asset class with hopefully better returns.
Strong CAGR across the horizons.
And so, we met a gentleman who is a PhD in mathematics, brilliant guy, a guy named Minder Chang. Minder could be one of the 5 brightest guys I've ever met and worked alongside of. And Minder invented the iShares at Barclays Global Investors. And, he was then the chief investment officer at BlackRock. And, we met him and he's like, I really do believe in alternative markets. I really do believe that there's probably a currency, there's a basket trade here, there's a way to arb this, and there's a way to create value for advertisers that couldn't access programmatic tool sets. And we're sitting in a meeting and he took out his checkbook and he wrote us $500,000 in the meeting. And he looks at us and he goes, you guys probably don't have a checking account. You're going to want to get your checking account open this week and deposit that. And he was our first, and what he said that was really remarkably uncanny. And he didn't know anything really about advertising. He's brilliant.
He got how markets worked.
Right. And he looked at us and what you just said is a perfect segue to what his recommendation was on the 3rd day of talking to him after he wrote us a check. It was, you're not only going to want to trade the market, you're going to want to feed the market. So I said, so Minder, what does that mean? Does that mean that not only do we have a trading desk, but we build an agency to feed? Yes. So we built an agency, and in the beginning, our job was to trade our own inventory.
You basically built a marketplace, and you were able to defy supply and demand principles.
Correct. Because there was so much confusion about audience buying. If you think about it, 2012, clients in Los Angeles and San Francisco understood audience buying. Clients then agencies in the greater New York to Boston area. The rest of the country really so you're going to reach people that, we can't get a list of people that are diabetic because of HIPAA, but we could figure out based on certain.
But you could buy credit card data from financial institutions, and you could take all these different data corpuses and find a way to create an overlay effect on it.
100%. So an early client was a drug company trying to find people that need diabetes testing supplies. And we could support them by rank and score, figuring out the markets where those people were. It was a target-rich environment. But we created an agency to feed our own platform. I think because it was really hard. It was a lot of running and then stopping. Mm-hmm. The biggest challenge early on was keeping enough skill set against the development of the platform to be.
Because you're not a tech guy. And that was something that I think is an interesting question I wanted to ask too is, we get this question a lot, which is I've got an idea. It's highly technical. I understand it strategically, but I don't have a technical co-founder. you obviously didn't seem to have a challenge with that. So
I did have a technical co-founder at that point.
you did.
I absolutely did. And
How do you go about finding a technical co-founder today? Just advice for I know the audience asks this all the time is, hey, I've got an idea. I need a technical co-founder. How'd you find your technical co-founder?
there were four of us that really started that business. And one of them was a guy that had he was a serial entrepreneur, had a lot of exits. One of them was a guy that you guys might know that had a lot of exits, but he was also a tech guy. One of them was a media strategist and planner extraordinaire, and my job was to help sell and create revenue very early on. So there was four of us. The business gets funded, and at one point we had like 15 coders, developers, and technical architects.
Of course.
And for us, the big challenge was early on was what we were building wasn't working. And not only wasn't it working, we were burning a ton of cash at that point. And
there were no clouds back then. You couldn't plug into an API and do all this stuff easily. It wasn't as accessible as
it wasn't accessible, but I mean, so very early on, our AWS bill was ridiculously expensive.
Mm-hmm.
When I look back at the start of MediaCrossing, what our original goals and plans look like and how we executed against building the tech piece, we failed miserably.
Mm-hmm.
We fucked that up. I mean, we had a distributed network of 15 full-time guys, and I think there was a fair amount of, it wasn't clear to each of them what their roles and responsibilities were.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you have a couple of people giving them direction, and it didn't work out. And, frankly, the board got really tired of that. And I think what ends up happening, what happened then is child's play compared to what's going to happen now.
Mm-hmm.
Because boards aren't going to let you run for a year trying to figure out how to prop up a tech product. They're going to kill you way before that.
Mm-hmm.
These investors have no patience now. Our guys had really good patience. Our guys were willing to, keep investing if they saw progress.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not a bright spot in the history of the business.
Yeah. How did you recover from it? What did you wind up doing? You must have found licensing, right? We were in the business, right? We were in media business in 2006. We started buying and selling, and we never wanted to build anything because everywhere we looked, there were tools out there. So we were just like, let's get that tool.
So long story short, the board made a decision about how they wanted the business to be staffed.
Mm-hmm.
And they had asked me, if I could wave a wand and make this company profitable in less than 6 months, what would I do? And I converted the business from a tech company where we were building our own tech to an agency where we were using demand side platforms and off the shelf technology that we didn't have to keep that on our books and have that as a burn area for us.
Mm-hmm.
And after we all agreed on that being the right decision, we had great growth.
Who was your go-to on the tech side? I'm curious. Who did we use for DSP?
Who didn't we use for DSPs?
So we very early on, we used AppNexus.
Yeah.
We used the Trade Desk early on. We used MediaMath. Then we used later versions of that. Probably the most notable demand-side platform that performed the best for us was the Trade Desk.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, we were spending millions a month through these guys, and they were servicing the hell out of us, and our clients were getting really good CPAs, especially when we're doing D2C advertising, and it was a good partnership.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to be in the tech business at that point because there were so many established players.
Yeah.
What was I going to compete against DV360? Was I going to build a platform that's going to compete against Google? Was I going to have a platform that was going to change the way people access Facebook and Instagram?
Yeah.
So there were,
But your competitive advantage, you yourself, was selling and service. You said it from the beginning.
100%.
So you didn't want to end up in Mr. Gerson's basement again, right?
Yeah, I didn't really. Let me tell you something. I am, to be really direct, I didn't want to be a first-time CEO and fail. I didn't want to take that job that I promised a bunch of investors that I would kill, for them. And I didn't want to come into that business thinking, you know what, white flag, it's not going to get done. And
Did you get close?
no, I never I never thought that I wanted to like throw the towel in ever. And I'll tell you why, because when you guys know this way better than me, when you have a payroll and you have people that rely on you, they're people you like and they're people you spend more time with than your own family. And if you can find success together and you've built a culture, like the pre-COVID culture of everybody working in the same room till 9 o'clock at night trying to fix what's broken, that gives you the endorphin to keep going. So I never woke up going, I fucking hate this. I'm not doing this anymore. Never felt that way. I always woke up really early thinking, here are the 3 things we're going to get done that move the ball down the field.
I would push back on you and say you probably woke up a number of days saying, I fucking hate this, but I'm not going to let these people down.
Nope. I would say I'm really frustrated and I need to
almost
overwhelmed. So the day the board and I agreed that we were going to really pivot this business, we had to fire 17 people and we were running out of money.
That's rough.
And literally we had to get all the terminations done before Friday afternoon, because Monday so we're going to talk about FP&A in a second. The most important person in every startup's an FP&A person. So you know exactly how much you need to spend. And if people don't know what FP&A is and they want to start a business, they better start researching that.
Well, if you don't know what FP&A is and you try to start a business, you're fucked. So
completely upside down. So
that is not a cost center, folks. That's a growth center.
Yeah. So Mary looks at me and she's like, you understand that like we only have enough money for the next 90 days if we terminate all these people by Friday. So it's like 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Payroll periods suck, don't they?
5 o'clock. It's almost 5 o'clock. There's 3 people we haven't terminated. And I remember, and I hated it. It all fell to me. I did every one of them with our CFO. And it's 4:50. There's 3 people that we haven't terminated yet. And we make the decision to fire all 3 at the same time in the same room. And just to get it done. Just to get it done.
Dark spot for you, I bet.
It was the worst day ever. And the 3 people we had saved for last were 3 people I really liked. And we fire them. And
it still hurts, right?
It still hurts. So one guy, and I hope he sees this, and I hope he like understands like where my head was. It was his birthday. And I fire him.
never the right day.
And like I just felt like garbage.
Yeah.
But by Monday it was a new payroll period, and we had to do this. I mean, we had hired a woman as a junior planner, and she went to Ithaca. She was a really smart kid, and the day we fired people, she was on the list. And her parents drove from Chicago to Connecticut to drop off some of her belongings, so she just leased a place down the street from the office. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, her parents, like, she's like, this is my mom and dad. They dropped my bed off. And I just remember, like, if you're in a startup, so this is like, goes back to like, be really smart about how much money you need to cover to reduce burn. Be really smart about how much you can afford to hire. Be really smart about, so like my crash and burn stories are all about me firing people that under normal circumstances did not deserve to be terminated, right? So I fired this woman, and I remember 2 weeks after I fired her, she called me. She's like, I moved here, I signed a lease. I can't pay my rent this month. And I'm like, I sent her a personal check.
Yeah.
I swear to you, it was gut-wrenching. What I learned very early on when we were restructuring the business was that the only thing that mattered was like you had a core team that really believed in this vision that we had.
Mm-hmm.
You were really smart about how you managed your balance sheet. You had an incredible FP&A person that didn't miss a trick when it came to figuring out where your burn was and when you were going to we would do a burn gap analysis. Like, we know by like March, we're going to be like within 10 grand a month and we were like counting down the days based on our forecast, based on our expenses. And, you know,
buddy breathing and scuba diving.
100%. What I said so there was a team that surrounded me, and I used to say, like, look, I can't do every job here. And the people that can do the jobs I can't, I'm going to count on. And by the way, I know that they're going to make some mistakes, but their positive contributions to the business outweighed any sort of mistake or error or lack of judgment they might have had. and they all pulled together. So culturally, so like I look at these businesses that get started post-COVID, people are working from their bedrooms. They don't really know the people. They meet them at the Christmas party, but that's it. We were really fortunate. The core people that stayed with the company through the sale had all worked face-to-face together, and they were all grinding together as we built this business.
Shared empathy.
And the shared empathy, shared goals. And it was like the family that most people wish they had. These are really good people. And so the people that didn't get termed, the people that ultimately stayed, the people that propelled the business forward, the people that got transitioned over to the new co after we, moved the business over, these are really dedicated people that like were the company. It wasn't me. I mean, it was this whole team of people that really gave a shit about every day.
So I want to stop you there, and I want to just bring us back to this concept of being an overwhelmed CEO, right? When you felt frustrated and overwhelmed in your business while you were coming up, did you develop a strategy for dealing with it? And what was that strategy? And what was it like?
I tend to find contemporaries that I can lean on.
Okay.
I've been through the war. I had two guys in my, I had more than two guys, but I had two primary guys that I could call at any time. And one guy, I made him an advisor. It's just brilliant. You may know Matt Ryan. So Matt's a dear friend, and I've been friends with him for a long time. And we're partners on a couple of investments. And I'd be like, I mean, he was the chairman of Havas. I mean, like, he's the real deal, right? So I call him like, I'm kind of faced with this and this. What would you do? He's like, why don't we get a cup of coffee? And so I could lean on somebody that had kind of been there, sold some companies, had been involved with dogfight RFPs, had been in the trenches, had fired and hired new teams to service clients so that those agencies could meet the expectations of those clients, like everything that we deal with as agency owners and strategic thinkers. He was one of those guys that could provide a point of view that was invaluable. And I had a really, really good friend who was who owned a small private equity shop in Norwalk, and a little older than us, and been through the war. Really smart guy. And, like, he would look at he would go to a meeting and he would say to the guy looking for money, he goes, "Hey, so what's your customer acquisition strategy?" Guy goes like, "We don't really have budget for that." He goes, "I'm not going to invest any money in your business unless you talk to my friend Michael Kalman. He can help you." And so Tom passed away 6 months ago. He was a really close friend, but he was one of those guys I could call at like 4 o'clock. "Hey, I'm dealing with this and this. What do you think? What would you do?" And he'd be like, "Let's get dinner tonight. We're going to walk through this. We're going to architect the solution." And I'd be like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, we're going to meet at Tarantino. Just you and I, we're going to go and just block the evening." And so I got used to talking to people that had, I got used to talking to people like you guys that had done it and been there. I really, really tried hard not to bring it home, right? Like being frustrated and explaining to your wife like how shitty things are doesn't help. It doesn't help. And I wanted to figure out a way to kind of balance that out. But as an entrepreneur, somebody who kind of runs a business, it's really hard to, you can't shut it off, especially if you're going in on Saturdays for half a day or Sundays for part of the day. So to your point, it is, I hate that expression more than anything. It's lonely at the top. What you find is there are fewer people that you feel you want to confide in, but you really can't, because it can change the dynamics of the organization. Like when the board wanted to, sell the business, it's not like we were running around telling employees we don't want them to leave. Like you had a small group of people that were working on the transaction. What I would say to you is that there is no substitute, no matter how old you are, to find personal relationships where they can help you better yourself.
Yeah.
I was frustrated a lot.
Yeah. I always find you don't recognize you're frustrated. Well, you don't recognize you're overwhelmed until there's like a moment. It usually happens for me. I'd say once a quarter, I'll come home and I'll just notice something is off.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that, because I think that people don't realize that that is what happens to people, because we're in the ownership position. To your point, it's lonely, whatever. We're not supposed to feel this way because we're the check writers. But
Right.
I've developed a strategy, which is to tell myself that I'm allowed one day, right?
Yeah.
In that one day, I could do anything. You could talk to people, you could seek self health, right? You can take care of yourself, go to the spa, whatever it is, right? Go read at the beach.
You need a diversion.
You need a diversion.
Right.
Usually the next day when I wake up, the answer, or at least the thing that's going to charge me up to break free of that overwhelming feeling, happens in the car ride or the shower.
Shower for me.
Yeah.
My bathroom is like this golden spot where, like, in the morning,
Amazing.
2 or 3, it's the weird, it just clicks.
Yeah, all the time.
And I don't take a 10-hour shower. I'm taking like 3-minute shower.
Yeah, same.
I go, here's what's going to solve the day. Mm-hmm. So my best friend in the world is a guy who lives in Florida who started a business, and he went through the Goldman Sachs, program, and he got sponsored in that, and he killed it. And he calls me, and I said to him, look, you own your own business. You need the one day a week. You need to start taking at least a half day Friday. You need to kind of figure out a way, and that's not an errand day. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm in Florida, I'm gonna go play golf.
Yeah.
Maybe it's bike riding. Maybe it's exercise.
Yeah.
Maybe you're gonna go to museums. I don't know. Whatever, like, kind of just allows you to disconnect from everyone, because that pressure builds up.
Yeah.
And so for somebody that has to make payroll, and guys, I have such enormous respect for guys that fund their own businesses. I mean, I sit on this board of this company called PersonalRX, where I do strategy work for them. The CEO, he'll work every day. Mm-hmm. Literally, he is driven and he's grinding and he's got his own money in the business. Or Chris, literally, like these. But no matter how successful you are, or how wired you are into your own business, mm-hmm. or how much your people depend on you, mm-hmm. you still need that me time, and it's got to be, it's got to rejuvenate you.
Yeah.
You've got to figure that out. That work-life balance for me, I got to be honest, for a long time was really screwed up.
Yeah, yeah. I invented an idea. I'll share with the forward obsessed audience and you. When District was underway, it was, you're talking about a $17 million construction project. Like it was, and we had never. Pete and I owned a 2-family house in West Haven.
Yeah.
Right. To give you a sense of real estate,
which we literally bought because we wanted to bring one of our best dear friends. We brought him here through H-1B.
Oh, no way. So you needed a place to house them.
A place to house them. So that was, just to give you a sense.
Affordable too, because we didn't have a ton of money.
Yeah.
But so we're in the middle of this, and things are getting overwhelming. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm grinding 100 hours a week, going crazy. So I invented it every 5 weeks. Was it 5 weeks or 6 weeks? I think it was every 5 weeks.
What's that acronym?
PDW.
PDW,
which was special because it was my father. So my father created a company when we were young for his home contracting business. He used to do bathrooms and kitchens in New York City and Queens, and he called it PDW Incorporated, which stood for Paul, David, and Whitney, which is my older brother, myself, and my sister.
Yeah, that's cool.
I created PDW as a day, which is a personal day of wellness.
Yeah.
You remember that? You used to see those in the calendar.
Yeah, they're still there. Yeah. They're still there. I'm not
like that.
I'm not as regimented about it. I used to everybody don't fuck with my PDW, but I would go to the, I'd get my.
I used to hate when we had pictures on PDW days because I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm taking
I'd schedule my doctor's appointments.
Good discipline.
Yeah, because you got doctor's appointments and dentist appointments to keep up, just like maintenance stuff, right?
Yeah.
Your physicals, your this, your that. I always put them on those days. I'd go. I'd have, if I was, I'm into body hacking, so I would do, I'd get an IV, or I might get a massage, or cryotherapy. I might go to the beach in the morning. Sometimes I'd schedule out the day. I'd go start off and go read or listen to a podcast in my car if it was cold,
right,
at the beach, looking at the water, right, parking right in front of the water, just to start my day differently. And I think that's really important for people to do that, because we do grind. I mean, Pete and I, we used to think it was awesome to be like, yeah, we worked till 4 o'clock in the morning and woke up at 7.
On a personal note, my health got pretty bad, right? And a little health scare. And I went to see my doctor and was like, you got to make some changes.
Yeah.
And you spend so much time working on your own business, they don't spend time thinking about the things you need to do to improve your health. So I had hired a health coach, a woman from Los Angeles, and I would get on these Zoom calls with her, and she dialed in my diet. And she's like, so how do you feel like if you don't eat all day and all of a sudden you like slam down a burger? I'm like, I feel pretty crappy. She's like, we're not going to have those days anymore. We're going to work to like figuring out how to optimize your life. So all the things we talk about with clients is optimizing their business, optimizing their advertising, optimizing their marketing, optimizing their staffing, like fucking optimize. But we don't do it for ourselves.
Yeah, fuck the FP&A, optimize the Michael.
Right. And so it's exactly, so I remember I lost a bunch of weight. I took on a trainer and I took on this personal, fitness, like diet, nutrition coach. And most of those habits, believe it or not, after 3 years or so really stuck. And I still journal my food just to know how many calories I'm taking in. And I still go to see the trainer and all that stuff. But what you said makes like an enormous amount of sense. But I think the problem is that we're so, and less this current generation, but the previous generation that's not like my kids' age, we're really focused on career and achieving some sort of success at the expense of health. And now
I call it the hedonic treadmill era.
Yeah, right. And so
Partly, I also think that we're also, at least for me, there was that, but there was also the idea of taking care of family.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And not recognizing that, like someone told me the other day, they're like, oh, this guy, he was all about family, but he didn't take care of himself. So at the end of the day, he died randomly and he let his family down. And because he didn't have things set up properly and he sort of was running himself ragged, that he let, at the end of it all, his family, for the time being, post his leaving this world, his family's in big trouble right now because they weren't prepared. Right?
It's preventable, and it's really terrible.
So you have to, so we do this stuff. We work our asses off to take care of our family and our children and our lifestyles, but we don't realize that it's the health and the mental wellness that is really, really important.
100%.
Yeah.
I want to do a slight shift to something that you talked about earlier, which is, because I know the audience is thinking this, and I'm thinking it too. So I'm gonna ask, and I don't mean to sound like a jerk when I ask it, but
go ahead.
You've done very well for yourself by conventional financial standards. And so therefore you said your children have an awesome work ethic.
They do.
I want to unpack that because I'm a pretty new dad myself, and I came from nothing, and my kid is going to have lots of things that I didn't have.
Right.
Up. So my question for you is, I don't want to label a generation, right?
Go ahead.
But what I want to do for a second here is, we have the privilege of living in one of the richest states by economic status in the country.
In our area,
right?
it's unbelievable.
No question, right? You're in Fairfield County, et cetera. How did you...
overregulated, but...
Yes, too. But yes, and...
That too.
But that being said, how did you make sure that your children had that work ethic when ultimately you had the choice to not make them have to ever work a hard day in their life? So I want to understand how you embedded that from their youth. One, because I'm selfishly wanting to know how to do it myself, but two, because I think a lot of people need to hear this so we don't create a lot of people who are growing up entitled and don't have the ability to grind. And I want to use that word grind because I know hustle culture gets a bad name.
Right.
But the reality is, if you want some of the things that we have, you got to hustle for it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think both my wife Jill and I are really pretty grounded. And there's, as we've explained, Orcas, there's always going to be somebody that's got way more than you. And this, like, if you turn this life into a competition, you'll always be disappointed. So you've got to do you. And I think my kids are, unlike some of their contemporaries, I think they're really grounded. And I think some of the things that they did when they were in high school especially made a difference in terms of their outlook. both my kids did 4 years of B3, Builders Beyond Borders. So they'd go to Haiti or Guatemala or Colombia during their vacations, and they would build, schools and classrooms and like bathrooms, and they'd live in tents outside in third world nations. I mean, if you go to Guatemala,
They were also building perspective.
If you go to Guatemala, like some of the things they teach you at Builders Beyond Borders, which is an incredible charity, is we're not going to cut the shirts that we wear. We're going to wear them as is, because we're going to leave those shirts for the people that are there. And if you cut it, you show, like they would pay for this and they have no money. You're going to show lack of respect for the things that you have. So you're going to wear those clothes. We're going to wash those clothes. And then we're going to donate everything we bring. But the interesting story is, like, you go to Guatemala, one of the delicacies is guinea pig.
Kui kui is Peruvian.
Right. And so they're feeding, like, so if you don't want to have that, that's fine. But you just say, no, thank you. Like, so literally, like, their peers, the people they hung around, the things they wanted to see and do, I think really did keep them grounded. I mean, look, we're all in a position where, unlike a lot of the other folks out there, your kids are going to graduate college without student debt. And so the question is, what are they going to do with their education? Do they have a goal? Do they have objectives they want to reach? Here's what I think is interesting. So my younger daughter goes to Parsons. My older daughter's at Northeastern for psychology in the grad school. But my younger daughter knew she wanted to go to Parsons.
She's studying design?
Studying design. She knew she wanted to be a clothing designer. And for a year and a half before the application process, she took lessons to learn how to sew. She took lessons to learn how to like work with materials. And she would make clothing and they would photograph it, and she built a portfolio. I can't help her with that. Like, that's not a skill set I have, but I watched how hard she worked. And I was blown away by the satisfaction she got out of preparing herself for that. My older daughter, when she decided she wanted to go to grad school for psychology, she worked at a halfway house in New Hampshire, the 11 to 7 shift. And
Tough shift.
And I said to her, like, help me understand. So, like, if one of these prisoners, Dad, they're not prisoners, they're guests. All right, okay. If one of the guests leaves the jail, it's not a jail, it's a dorm. Okay, one of the guests leaves the dorm in the middle of the night. She's like, I tell them to go back to their dorm. And so what you want to do is you want to raise children, obviously, that are...
She's teaching you.
Yeah, she's teaching me. They're way smarter about this stuff than they... But ultimately, you've done pretty well. If your kids are relatively grounded, they have a direction they want to take, they find a passion. So what I say to my friends who have younger kids, I'm like, try to help your kid identify what they like to do, because that's the direction. Like, if your dad was a dentist and you're a dentist and you're making your kid be a dentist, I guarantee your kid 3 in a row, I guarantee your kid may not want to be a dentist. But if your kid wants to curate art collections for really rich guys and help them figure out how to buy certain types of art, you should foster that. And so I think my big point to you, to answer your question, and I probably took too much time, is if you can foster what they like, and if you can encourage that, and it's unconditional, and you can support them, having those grounded children who really want to succeed in society, but also want to find some satisfaction, is, I think, the difference between them and me.
I'm looking for some patterns and heuristics in these guests. And one of the questions I keep asking, I want to ask you, because I'm trying to normalize the data set, is how do you cultivate passion?
I was about to give you a really quick answer, and then I'm going to...
And I'll tell you why I asked the question, just to be very specific. I've done some studying and some research on this. I've pulled some things. And as it turns out, which was surprising to me because I've always had a sense of passion, something like more than 8 out of 10 people on average from a large data set, this is not like N equals 100, it's like a pretty big set of studies, don't know what their passion is and don't know how to find it. So my question for you is, clearly your children have found a passion, you have a passion. Sounds like a lot of people you worked with have had passions. How do you, and I mean not you, but you, the plural, for the audience you're speaking to, how do you cultivate passion?
I think you have to tap into what somebody gets satisfaction from. I'll give you an example. I was a horrible student in elementary school and middle school. Like they literally were ready to toss me out. I mean, I just was a square peg going into a round hole. And for me at that age, I mean, I was labeled as maybe he's lazy, or maybe I just wasn't interested. Like I just wasn't interested in the things that you had to do to get to here. And I remember at a very early age saying, I want to work. I have a passion towards working. I always had a job. And a friend of my dad's said to me, and he's a really smart guy, Harvard guy, like just a brilliant guy. He looks at me and goes, here's the thing. I know you hate this whole school thing. And I know you just want to jump into the work world, but you'll be severely limited in the work world if you don't assemble this tool set that you need to get through school. Like you literally you'll make it so much harder on yourself. So if you go through a classic liberal arts training and you can learn how to think and problem solve, that will help you make more money down the road. And so my passion was really staying focused against certain goals and initiatives early on. My passion's different now. My passion's more about the journey. My passion before was about the destination. Like I wanted to have enough money where I didn't have to like worry about stuff, and working hard was like a means to do that. And my passion now is like, how can I take some of these learnings I've accumulated over all these years, and how can I help others? Because I get satisfaction from doing that. I get satisfaction from like sitting on board calls with Chris. I get satisfaction from sitting on the Jordan Porco Foundation board to prevent teen suicide, and figuring out ways we can roll out the program and make a difference with kids at risk. I have a passion helping my friend Tom, who's starting a robotics company in Connecticut called R Sigma, where we're figuring out a way for him to like take this learning that he's got and this knowledge base in the people and put it against solving real world problems, including things that involve AI. So I think you have to draw passion out. Like here's what's going to be interesting. When your kids get older, they naturally kind of, you naturally have to kind of push them out of the house in terms of like, we're not going to sleep. We're not going to sit in front of the TV and watching TV and play video games all day. We're going to find something we like to do. And in some cases with kids, it's sports and the discipline of athletics. In some cases, it's computers and the things that they can do. But I think the hardest thing is finding people with passion. And by the way, the second hardest thing is managing people that don't have passion, like in terms of building culture in an organization. And it's hard to identify someone's passion point if you're working remotely. Like in the very beginning, and if you're in a creative enterprise like you guys are, you guys are in the business of creating ideas and selling ideas. And if that goes from a gusher to drips and drabs, that's a problem. And so pulling out that passion from people that work in an organization and putting them in the right job and making sure they feel comfortable and safe and they can fuck things up, but they can also succeed and be top of the mountain, it's actually a pretty cool thing. And I was pretty good at identifying, I think, people that had certain passion. I was also good at like not hiring the who, not the what. Right. So like finding people that I knew that I'd want to hang with and like they could be part of the team. It was hard to break into, and I would imagine it's much the same here. It was kind of hard to break into MediaCrossing because like these are people that had all worked together. And so like if you were a new employee, we used to say during an interview process, you're going to feel like you're on an island for like 6 months and it's going to suck. You're just going to feel like you're being left out. But people are having conversations because you have to kind of insert yourself in. You have to be an alpha. And you have to like insert yourself in and say to them, no, you're doing this meeting, you have to include me.
I'm so glad that you said that. And I just, verbal diary, I had to share this because it's just like, it just came out as an outburst, and I apologize for the interruption. Is like, I had an incredible conversation with somebody recently. And during, ultimately years ago, we had to move on from that. They weren't a fit for the organization, and, we had to do the hard thing, and they were very salty about it. And recently they came back to me and they just, out of nowhere, just reached out to me and said, can we connect? I said, yeah. They said, hey, we've both done a lot of growing up. Looks like you've done this, and that. And they said something to me, which just really made me happy. I get a little emotional even talking about it. And the person said, I couldn't cut it at DS. And I couldn't accept that.
Yeah.
Then I thought it was you guys and it was this and it was that. And, and I did a lot of talking shit and this thing. And now I tell people one of the most formidable roles I had was at DS. And it meant so much to me hearing that years later,
Right.
because, it sucks to see the negative reviews. It sucks to see the things,
Right.
the anonymous or whatever it is. But I appreciate you sharing that, because it triggered a very positive memory, because it said, that level of self-awareness. It's like, you know what? We're not for everybody. So clearly, I'm happy that you said it was hard to get in the door with you guys at MediaCrossing, because I think it's always been that way with us.
Every organization has three types of people: people that make things happen, people that watch things happen, and people that don't know what's happening. Like, those are the three types of people in every organization. The key is the people that don't know what's happening, you're always churning those. And the people that make things happen, you're assuming you've drawn them into a place where they find their passion, and if they like calling on clients and they like doing account management work and they're really good at it, and at 10 o'clock at night, they're sending client emails, not because I've told them they have to, because they want to. And if I find a woman who comes in with a data degree from a top university and she wants to be a strategist, and she's like, I want to replace you, I'm like, awesome. Those are the people I'm looking for. And I used to say to people, and usually if you term somebody, you unless it's a layoff because of cash, but like when you're firing somebody, it's because they didn't meet your objectives. They didn't meet your expectations. They didn't deliver based on what you were hoping they would deliver. In most cases, whether they want to admit it or not, you're taking them a little bit out of their misery, right? You're resetting their life. And
They're not happy. You're not happy. Why be unhappy together?
yeah,
I had an advisor who said to us, I've never fired somebody that didn't know it was coming.
100%.
And then we fired, and he knew.
And then he didn't know he was being fired?
No, it gets good. It gets good. The guy that we were going to lay off, we were going to let go of, if we were going to fire, he knew, he was friends with him.
Oh.
Okay, he had a relationship with. And then we fire him. And an hour later, I get a call from the guy, from our advisor, and he goes, I can't believe it. I said, what? He goes, he had no idea. It was like, it could not, because you're right. Everybody, your guess is they know, but the truth, unless it's a layoff and it's unexpected because the market
100%.
But this guy literally was like deer in the headlights. I can't believe this. Oh my God, I'm shocked.
Right.
We were like, you're not working.
So it was interesting. We hired a guy in ops, and ops is like a role that you really can't be a clock watcher. You're probably getting started at 8:30 at the latest. You're probably working till the campaigns are trafficked.
Yeah.
I would bonus guys on like lack of a manageable error rate. So if your error rate was X%, I mean, like we incentivize people to double check their work. So if someone does a fat finger trade, they put $100 in for a campaign, but they actually hit the zero against 1,000 for the day spend. That's a 10x. And we're in the agency business. Our fees don't really cover the mistake. We eat it, right? And I remember we hire this guy, comes in, he's interviewing, he's really dedicated. And like the first Monday, so we hire him on a Friday, comes in on a Monday, he was unemployed, comes in at like 9:35. He's got like, he's on Slack, he's in Salesforce, he's got a list of objectives set up for the day. His manager's given him, here are the 10 campaigns I need you to traffic before close of business. This gets half of them done. So half of them launch. The other half, the client has an IO with us, right? Half of them don't launch. So the other 5 campaigns get picked up by 2 other people. Next day comes in 9:45. Third day comes in 10 o'clock. So I look at his manager and go, we don't get paid to go to the beach. This is one of those ones where we're going to have to like bring it to his attention. So we brought it to his attention, and he's like, oh, I thought that's when people got in. No, this whole team gets in at 8:30. And so firing somebody that completely doesn't understand that they are underperforming is also like a pain point. I get it. Like we, at the very latest, come in at 9, leave at 5. Okay, I get it.
And what I say is, I don't care what time you come in. I don't care what time you get done. As long as you're adding more value than you're taking from the organization, I'm happy.
Management by objective.
I just hate fucking managing people. I hate it. I can't stand it. I just want people to do the job that I hire you for. You can come out of the job. You can do other jobs for me. You just do, right? I'm not a manager. I don't have the skill set. I'm such a get it done guy, right? I like to make decisions and I like to get shit done. And managing to me is so problematic.
It was for me for a while, and somebody had to like sit me down and explain to me that like the people that work for me aren't going to have the same passion that I do. Yeah. Like you're an intense person. Like, and I mean that in the nicest possible way because I really like you. Yeah. But you're intense, and your low intensity days are still 10x the intensity of your average person. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's a bad thing. That's made you successful, and that's also made you unstoppable. And by the way, I have a feeling, and I don't know this, my hypothesis would be when a client hires you and they hire you, it's because they know that you're going to apply that intensity to their business to help them achieve their marketing and advertising objectives. Mm. That's what you're going to do. And no one is going to stand between you and that objective, right? And someone looked at me and goes, but your people aren't going to do what you do. No one wants to come in on Saturday. So if you come in on Saturday, that's your time to come in on Saturday. And not everyone's going to see the goal. So what I think has to happen in most service organizations is you spend a lot of time breaking down these larger goals into smaller goals so people can find those smaller goals more digestible and attainable. Mm-hmm. And knowing, like, you guys have forgotten more of how to get to, like, from A to Z than you care to remember, but you just know how to get there. It's sort of like driving home at night. You could probably close your eyes half the ride. Mm-hmm. The people that work for us end up looking for us to provide them with leadership guidance and suggestions on how to achieve the journey, how to get from A to B. So what I like in what I'm doing now is like that advisory of helping people kind of understand the mission and the goal and getting there is something I think I can have an impact on. It's something you guys do with your clients every day.
Yeah. Roll us back for a second because I know we're eating up a lot of your time, and I'm really grateful for it.
I'm good till 1.
So awesome. Appreciate that. You sold a private company.
I did.
I was just talk about the passion of the exit.
Yeah, I was you sold a private company to a public company.
Yeah, hardest thing I ever did. Not even a question.
So you sold a private company to a public company.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that are hard about that. I know, but I'd like for you to tell the audience, one, why is that so freaking hard? And two, take us through that journey.
It is like trying to figure out a way to recruit the next Michael Jordan that hard. It is. So if you're a NASDAQ listed company, the reason the NASDAQ is really so prestigious for tech companies, it's really the good housekeeping seal of approval. So the company that purchased us was a NASDAQ listed company and requires the governance requirements to be on the NASDAQ are extra diligent. Case in point, if you're a small company, under 100 people, and you hire an audit firm, your audit fees and your taxation work is probably between $40,000 to $70,000 a year. If you sit on the NASDAQ with the same size business, your accounting fees have gone to $550. Wow. It's roughly 10x.
Wow.
And so,
was SVB on the NASDAQ?
SVB, I think, was on the Dow Jones, but everybody was using them in the tech space, right, including businesses I've been, consulting for. But yes, so we had our investors had been in the business since the very beginning. The average investment fund is probably 5 years between them funding and them exiting. Family offices, a little more lenient, 7 years, but we were nearly like 9-10 years with the original investors, and great people. They were very generous with me, and they were very generous to our team, and they were incredibly supportive, no complaints whatsoever. I mean, we lucked out. We won the lottery with good guys that helped the business. It doesn't mean they weren't demanding. Didn't mean that like they didn't call you on the weekends to see what was going on. I mean, like they weren't hands off, but they were a good group, right? So we decided to market the business. COVID vaccines had started becoming distributed. People were going out of their house again, and we had picked up some new clients, and business was on an uptick. And we had a board meeting, and there was a discussion about selling the business. A lot of the investors, frankly, advertising wasn't a core part of their portfolio. They were in other businesses, crypto, payment systems, other financial service products. Really, a lot of these guys are pioneers and innovators in those areas. And this business was kind of like a white elephant for them. It was like separate and distinct from everything else they were doing. So it made sense. So we wanted to run a process that was defensible because we had investors, and we wanted to be in a position where we could sell the business for the highest value. So we hired an investment banker, we hired M&A attorneys, we built a memorandum that we were able to provide to potential buyers. In the summer of 2021, we started doing a roadshow. I remember like people are still coming to, we were on Zoom calls and a couple face-to-faces, and we're talking to people about our business, sharing our financials, sharing everything. But there were a couple of decisions I think the audience would benefit from that we made early on that made a difference in how we sold the business. I always knew that an option to sell the business to have a capital event would be from a public company, just because in the ad space, there's most of the money to buy these businesses weren't from other private businesses. They were really from public companies of all given sizes. And so I hired Markham, which is where I met Bruce. Mm-hmm. I hired Markham very early on to do our consulting and our tax work. And I literally had my discussions with them were I want you to look at us as a small public company. I want you to have the same bar for us, the same RevRec standards, the same GAAP accounting treatment. So I hired a CFO that worked at a publicly traded company as our CFO, who could do FP&A work, who was incredibly bright and really, just really skilled at doing the financial work we needed to do to make sure we could budget properly every quarter and every year. And so hiring the right FP&A people, really smart about forecasts. I mean, like literally, we could have been within 2% of a forecast on a quarter. I mean, that's how tight we had gotten. Hiring Markham. Oh, and by the way, hiring really smart attorneys for all of our commercial work. So before we sold, we had all of our commercial agreements with vendors, all of our commercial agreements with clients, and all of our commercial agreements with employees were all buttoned down. All of our financials had been audited for the last 7 years by Markham. And the offers we got reflected the fact that we put some time and energy early on into good governance. It made it harder to do stuff. I mean, like we kept employee files. We did everything that was best practices for like employees, from tax. I mean, you name the part of our business, we had optimized all of those things. If RevRec standards accounting, I mean, if somebody didn't pay us what they fully owed, we had to, take a write down. I mean, literally we did everything as if we were a small company. So I remember speaking to the folks that bought us, and the CEO said, I don't know if you guys I don't know if we'd be able to buy you. And I was like, well, why? Because, well, you're a private company. You most likely don't have the same standards we do. We're a NASDAQ listed company.
He's not trying me.
And it's really funny. So I said, hey, you guys use Markham? We use Markham. Why don't you have your partner talk to our partner and come up with a punch list of the things we're deficient on? And he goes, how do you know I go, because I did my research. I figured out you guys use the same accounting firm that we do. Partners get on the phone and they are looking for us to like be deficient somewhere. And a guy calls me back and goes like, you weren't lying. You literally have your commercial agreements in place, your accounting. But basically there were certain accounting things we had to do to get it to the standard of a public company. And we had to make a little bit of investment. We had to do some work there. What was really the hardest part in any sale, and this is where it goes sideways for most, is the pricing stage and the reps and warranty stage of a purchase agreement. And I am telling you, 7 weeks of 7 days a week, filling out that section with a team of people that knew where all the contracts were. There were 985 contracts that went into the reps and warranty section of that agreement that all had to be individually numbered and inventoried as part of the sale. And what I would say to your audience is there are no shortcuts. If you want to command a premium price at exit, you have to formulate a strategy of governance really, really early on and So what does that mean for folks listening? You can't put your personal expenses to the business if you want to sell it. You can't have a summer rental through the business. You can't rent a 911 through the business. You also have to be in a position where, like, when they assess what you're paying your employees, you're within industry norms. Like, you can't have a business development guy making $2.5 million. Like, that might be aberrant, right? That's far and away more than what probably the industry would pay for similar talent. And so all of these things, all these ratios and all of these things have to kind of fit within this box perfectly, or there's no deal. And so if you do take on investors and your investors have an expectation that you sell the business in 3 to 5 years to a public company, all of that work that you have to do to make yourself saleable, to command a top price at exit, has to be done. I watched a friend of mine who runs a private company who didn't do all that, get an offer from a public company.
And he got killed.
He got killed. It never happened. And so the first price out the gate was 1.5x the second best price. But they literally, when they backed out their personal expenses and they backed out like the vacation to Italy and they backed out like some headcount and they didn't disclose a lawsuit, like all these things.
Yeah. EBITDA took a friggin' kick in the pants.
Right. And so it was really, part of it was I was obsessed with the notion of not being scrutinized by my board. Obsessed. I never wanted to have a discussion where the numbers that were presented to them weren't vetted by like a real accounting firm.
Why? Why were you obsessed? Where in your past did that come from?
I don't know. I was always prepared when I went to meetings, and I'm not an accountant by nature, and I wanted to be in a position where we were beyond reproach. I wanted to be in a position where it was unquestionable when we put a number up.
You don't like to lose.
Right. I do not like to lose. But I also don't want to be in a position where, like, if I don't know something, I'm going to find a subject matter expert. And it just so happens that, like, I didn't want accounting to be my blind spot, because every business I've ever worked with, either consulting or been a part of or seen from the outside, failed because those things were not buttoned down.
The plumbing.
Right.
Math is the law of the universe.
100%. So, like, if you crack the code on all of that, and you legitimately, based on those standards, make a real EBITDA, you got a business. And I didn't, and I was crazy about that, because and I also was crazy about, like, growing talent at the same level, like staffing and building culture. But the governance piece really does discourage a lot of smaller companies from being bigger companies, because they realize it's a big leap.
It's not sexy to them. They don't see the value of it.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And so we ended up getting a bunch of LOIs from a number of players. It would have been easy. A couple of those LOIs were similar in size to the one we sold to, without, going into details, but like being able to go through a process and selling a private company to a public company, first of all, was like one of the hardest things I said that I'd ever done, but was also really satisfying. Oh my God. Like, getting that stuff signed and, like, getting all that stuff, closed was a really incredible experience. But
what did it feel like after the wire hit? We got to ask that question.
It was a sense of relief, because a domestic wire from New York City hits within 30 minutes. So you sign it, and within 30 minutes, your dough's there. Yeah. And it was an exciting day. But with every culmination of a series of events, then there's, like, the next.
I was going to say, what's the next day feel?
So now we had to onboard with a public company. And so onboarding meant that we had to take all of our commercial documents with current clients and renegotiate all of them.
So like going to a urologist.
Right. So they fit within a format that was acceptable to their auditors in terms of RevRec standards. And we in 45 days, we got every employee that we transitioned over to sign their new package. We got every vendor that we transitioned over to sign the language we needed. And within 45 days, we got every client to redo their contract with us under the new paper. even some of them that really just held my feet to the fire and wanted to change up pricing. Hey, we're coming out of COVID. Pricing could be different.
You let them come out of the four corners of the document, they're gonna.
And you just feel like the room is, you're in a room and the room could have air conditioning on, but just feels like it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter throughout. Like you feel like you're in a sauna in a small conference room, and to your point, like I needed a release valve. So I'd have like 3 or 4 calls with clients over the course of a day about redoing their contracts. That was my job, right? So like if you own the company and you're thinking about like running it, you're also like the chief sales officer and the chief legal officer.
Chief cook, bottle washer.
Oh yeah. And I just remember being like sitting in a room one day and it just felt like it was 110 degrees in there. And it just felt like I couldn't get out of my own way until we finally got all the paperwork done. So we did close and we got all the paperwork done. And then now we had to like find new clients to be able to achieve our, financial plan.
Was it a straight buyout? Was there an earnout?
There's an earnout.
Yeah.
There's some cash in an earnout.
And that's tough, right? Because you probably were hot until 2020, pandemic hits, live events. I mean, what was...
Oh yeah, without reliving how painful it was. I mean, we had a number of notable clients, and one client laid off like 97% of their staff. So we closed our office on March 13th, probably when everybody else did.
Mm-hmm.
April 1st, we were owed from a handful of clients 7 figures. Like here, 7. I mean, like it was, and one client, we couldn't get them. They'd fired their entire accounting department pretty much, and we couldn't get them on the phone.
Yeah, we had money evaporated. Literally, they just like, yep, paying. Because people didn't know. It was just like this fear, like what's going to happen, shut down batten down the hatches and start paying people, and everybody sort of just went into like bankruptcy mode without there being bankruptcies.
100%, it was scary. It was a scary time.
Not protected by force majeure too. That was an interesting conversation with lawyers.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not an act of God. It's not force majeure. It's sort of like, no one's going to issue pandemic insurance based on the way this one was handled. I mean, it was, it felt like so between 2020, so follow me, 19 was a record year for us.
Yeah.
January and February of 2020, incredible first 2 months of the year, like best ever. Because January and February are usually light in the advertising business. We were all 12 cylinders.
Gangbusters, yeah.
It was crazy. And then like March hit. And then we started, and it was just like, it was the saddest set of numbers, like with all the cancellations. But I just felt like I was on a roller coaster from like 2020 to 2022.
Yeah.
It just didn't stop.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's when, to your point, having the discipline to like take that day that you've put on the calendar, I had to get better at that again. Like I had to figure that out again.
Yeah, I think we talk about the business is a roller coaster. You talk about the journey. That our intro says, business is a roller coaster. Strap in.
Yeah.
I often say the ups and downs of business happen like AM to PM. It's not even like quarter to quarter. It's AM to PM when you run a company.
Yeah.
You just don't know what's going to happen. You think that there's all kinds of issues that can pop up and crop up. We had at District, some of the best years leading up to 2020 because we started opening the business in 2018. Our co-working space, the actual co-working side of the building, was at 100% occupancy for 9 months. So we decided to go into a multi-$100,000 build out to add another 10,000 square feet, going from 18,000 to 28, largest co-working space in the state of Connecticut. We had 75% of it reserved. We opened the construction on March 9th.
Oh God.
2020. And we started making phone calls, telling all of our reservations were ready. And then the shutdown happens.
Right.
And I think every single reservation dropped on us. And then we started to erode from the 100%. So we wound up almost double, we added 50% of this new space and we lost it all. And then it started to go away. And that's when we actually that's when I started to think about customer acquisition. My strategy hat goes on and I'm like, how can I bring people back? And I thought about iCleanse and Stanley's door openers, all that kind of stuff to bring people back in data. You have to do that, but you sort of go into a hole for a day. You're like, what's going on? How do I deal with this? And come out with answers.
I don't think there's any easy solution. I think what we're going to see, the next shoe to drop in the economy will be the defaults on bonds related to commercial
real estate.
No question.
BlackRock, you mentioned it before. Your guy. That was at BlackRock. They say BlackRock has 75% more debt than they have value right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's coming.
And
It's funny too, because like one of my favorite business books is Ben Horowitz's The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
yeah,
And he talks about there's two types of CEOs. You've got the wartime CEOs and the peacetime CEOs, and depends on the stage of the company and the industry, et cetera, et cetera.
And I would war or peace.
What?
I think you're better at peace. I'm good at war.
I'm definitely not good at peace. Peace makes you crazy, but I'll call my therapist right now. But jokes aside, I think right now, there's a reason why high growth companies used to have a room called the war room, right? And we know it comes from military industrial complex and blah blah blah. And I know a bunch of people.
it was a strategy room.
Yeah, it's a strategy room. But in a lot of ways, like a lot of companies, it sounds like you were going to figure it out.
What was interesting, so MediaCrossing had grown so fast in 18, 19 we ran out of room. So I took the other half of the floor in downtown Stanford, and they finished it on like December of 19. And we had the place full for like 3 months, and then no one came back. And every time I walked into this other side that was beautifully built, my head exploded. And I was now carrying, and I was one of the few tenants in the building that continued to pay the rent because I had a contract, and I wasn't gonna we figured out how to do it, but we're gonna roll backwards over a landlord. I mean, they had a TI related to the expansion space. I mean, I think, look, I have a very dear friend who's a very senior real estate executive in the commercial space, and they're now grappling with the fact that it ain't going to be the way it was. It's taken them a while, and it's shell shocking, but they know that getting people back to work is going to be just a major lift. Now, look, in New York, they've done a fairly decent job within reason. They still haven't gotten. They still have half or something. Because law firms and banks want people back, and the agencies
Bob Iger,
right? And law firm and Bob Iger. But I think I think the best ideas come from cultures of people that work together and trust one another.
The data shows it. I mean, if you look at Silicon Valley in terms of they credited creative collisions and density among that particular space as some of the leading factors that unlock that innovation. My question for you, knowing that we're basically out of time at this point, is the world's changed, everything's changed, work has changed, and you talk about your kids who are in school, right? The norm now is remote first or remote only companies.
Right.
They talk about the challenges with hybrid. You've come from a world where you've got some of the most strategic and creative minds, and if you were building the next MediaCrossing tomorrow in a similar space, how would you get a density of creative people to come together and not have it be dribs and drabs, to use your metaphor from earlier, in a world that is remote first?
I think you have to find people that all agree that coming together at least 3 days a week will make a difference in their lives from a satisfaction standpoint, but also, be good for clients, and they'll make money doing it. It used to be that your whole life, Monday through Friday, was about the routine related to getting up, getting in a car, getting coffee, going to work, coming home in the dark, especially in the winter. And there's a generation of people that got out of college that don't know that. They don't understand. I mean, when I worked for Mr. Frost in 1990, and I was getting on a train from Westport at 5:15 in the morning to be there early enough.
Dark to light, light to dark.
Right. So explaining to somebody so here's what you get. You say to somebody, this is kind of the grind. And they're like, yeah, I don't think I have to do that to make a living anymore. So I would get that from people that I was hiring in a post-COVID world before we sold the business. I'm never going to come into the office. And so I can't imagine going into a job interview when I was 20 years old and saying, yeah, I'm never going to come to the office. I'm going to phone it in. There wasn't even Zoom when I started. I'm that old, right? And so I guess you'd have to really surround yourself that are like-minded, that really do believe that the outcome is worth all interrupting their lives and going to a place where you can find solutions and build harmony and find satisfaction, but still deliver a good product to a client that wants to keep you quarter over quarter. And getting to the consultant world, I still really like to get in a room with a client, because the conversation you end up having with the CEO of a company that's trying to figure out their strategy is far better, more robust than an hour-long, prepared Zoom call.
Yeah.
Like, I learned stuff while walking to the coffee machine with Larry at PersonalRX about what he's doing in terms of his expansion plans, more than I would if I got on a call with him at 9 o'clock to 10.
I'll use you as a bad joke if it's okay. Is like, David is useless on Zoom calls, right? Because he hates Zoom calls. We're all ADHD type people, right?
All of us pull that plug.
Yeah. So we're on Zoom, right? We're checking our phones. We're checking our email. The Slack's going off. Things are going off. You don't get focus. Versus, I would rather get on an airplane, spend 6 hours for a 30-minute meeting with a CEO, because I've got that CEO locked in for 30 minutes, versus 6 hours on Zoom when they got 100 different things on their plate. So,
or how about when you go to see that CEO and you're face to face and he picks up his phone and you go, hey, put your phone down.
well, I don't have the gall to do that. You and David do.
We have 30 minutes.
Monday, I had a family trip. Went down to Florida. Monday, we had a meeting with a potential investor, and he lived in South Florida, and I was like, I'm there.
Let's do it.
Yeah, he's like, come to my house, and I felt it to be great and intimate. He had me in his home office, and met his son, and it was fantastic.
You covered more ground in that short meeting than you could have on a dozen calls.
Yeah,
the quality of interaction.
The thing I struggle with, and I'd love your perspective here, because you sell, you advertise, you change people's minds, you win over hearts, right? You win over hearts and minds. You've been doing that your whole life. What's the future going to be like when? I just saw a study that said that right now in the United States, people care less about family, they care less about religion, they care less about having children. I think capitalism is getting questioned. The financial institutions are definitely getting questioned.
Definitely in the hot spot.
Yeah, I mean, so and the fabric of everything that we've been led to believe over all these years is actually being challenged in a way that I've never seen before.
So,
how do we sell people and reverse it?
I have a very counterintuitive point of view on this.
Mm-hmm.
I have an abundance mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all these changes post-COVID that have changed traditional routines will open up business opportunities for people that want to find them.
Mm.
And I actually think it's the reverse. So when someone says, the traditional family's gone and the traditional office is gone, I actually think there's a model for a collaboration space like the one you have to build best in breed talent to solve for X.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think that I really tend in a changing universe not to have a scarcity mentality, but an abundance mentality. Yeah. My abundance mentality means that there's absolutely more challenges, but opportunities to solve those challenges than ever before. So my big hypothesis, and we chatted over coffee this morning, was I think in a high interest rate, potentially high recessionary environment, the companies that make the next 36 months work by creating a revenue stream and solving a client problem will be not only the most robust, but the most resilient.
Yeah.
And they'll be the future of what the business world looks like going for the next decade. And I don't think there's any reason to think that business won't evolve because things are changing. I actually think there'll be people that people will embrace that. I mean, if you think about it, one of the things that people neglected is health. 38 million Americans with diabetes, 8.5 million of those don't know it. Think about that. Think about think of all the education. If you wanted to be in the health business, I'm this PersonalRX business that I'm a part of is so amazing because it's insulated from macroeconomic conditions. It's a business where people still need their meds no matter what the stock market's doing. And so the question is, what businesses do we want to go into that can have an impact on humans' lives in a marketplace that's more expensive and has more regulation to do business in? And those are the ones that are somewhat insulated from the macroeconomic environment. So
Principles like AJ was talking about in the last episode.
Economic, yeah.
Yeah, I love businesses. So
Characteristics.
I love businesses that have patents and innovation like iCleanse. I like businesses that have a very, very high service standard with a really good technology package like PersonalRX, where they are satisfying the needs of clients that take 6+ meds per day.
My belief system, and I want to bounce this off you, and then I know we have to close because many of us have to get on the road. My belief system is that the future of companies is going to take on a lot of the behaviors of society, which is behaviors like subscription. I subscribe and I unsubscribe to something. Correct. That's a behavior that we see. Another one for me is decentralization. And I don't mean just blockchain, right? Because I don't want to be that trite guy that says that. When I say decentralization, I mean the concept of like how Hollywood has worked for years, which is hub and spoke. People are going to come together for a specific objective, right? Specific goal over a specific time. They're going to achieve said objective, and then they're going to disperse. And that whole idea of organisms, I think, is how I see the future of business. Much to your point, whether it's people come together for a shared goal or purpose or in a shared gathering space to achieve a goal and objective, and then disperse to those things.
That dovetails with an abundance view of things where there'll always be, for good guys, smart things they can work on. And there,
You would agree with that?
I totally agree with that. But I also think that people would be willing to figure out how to get smart people in a room to achieve scale, speed to scale, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So like your idea of pulling together these people and then they scatter, you're pulling them together. You don't necessarily need all of them for like a long period of time, but you need them and their brain cells to get you to like prop up some business. And then you can kind of fill in where you want to have
It's like cloud computing.
Couldn't agree more.
Turn them on, turn them off.
I totally agree.
Michael, this has been fascinating. You managed to make me romantic again about the advertising and agency world.
I'm very scared for the next 6 weeks of my life.
Let's figure it out. I'm in.
I'm very much interested in your concept of abundance thinking and mindset. And this has been a great episode of Forward Obsessed. On that note, we always like to ask how you like to be found by our audience. Your socials, your websites, your...
So I'm working on the Propel Partners website now.
Mm-hmm.
When's the book come on, man?
You got the domain name, I'm assuming?
I do.
What's
I have
the domain?
Propel Partners.
PropelPartners.com?
I think it's propel-partners.com.
Put it in the show notes, folks.
Yeah.
Sorry. And Michael K. Kalman is my LinkedIn. People want to reach out. I'm not one of those consultants where I send you an estimate of what the bill's going to be for like the first hour. I take a lot of calls from a lot of entrepreneurs. I spend a lot of time face-to-face helping them ideate. And if there is a fit, great. If there's not a fit, I often have people in my network that I can refer that are a better fit than me. There's like 8 or 10 guys that like are in that zone. And I mean, you need a HubSpot sensei. I'm not your guy, but I have somebody who does that. So I love spending time with you guys. I think you've built something truly wonderful here. I think when you go throughout the state and you go, people know you and they know the quality of the team and the work that you do. And I think that you're able to do that on your terms. And I think that's what success should look like. You're doing it on your terms. And I couldn't think of a better way to spend the last couple hours than to spend it with both of you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, that's amazing to say. So on that note, I'd like to say stay forward obsessed, everyone. And thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for listening to Forward Obsessed. Please share this episode, subscribe, and leave a review on your podcast app. This episode was hosted by Pete Senna and David Salinas from the Digital Surgeons Podcast Studio in New Haven, Connecticut. Special thanks to our AV crew, Steve Walter and Meg Olson. Forward Obsessed is produced by Robert Roach. If you'd like to contact our team, visit us at forwardobsessed.com.